When my daughter-in-law called me lazy online, I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. I just stared at my phone screen for a long time, reading those words again and again until the letters blurred. Then I smiled. The kind of small, quiet smile that hides more pain than it shows. People always say the internet is full of strangers, but sometimes the harshest words come from someone you used to make breakfast for. That day, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the same table where I once helped my son with his homework, where I rolled dumplings for his wedding day, where laughter used to fill every corner. Now, it was just me, a cup of lukewarm tea, and the silence that stretched too long. My name is Leela. I am 63 years old, a retired school librarian, and a mother of one son, Daniel. Daniel was my pride and joy. He was quiet as a boy, gentle with animals, and always careful with his words. I used to say, "Daniel, you were born with a calm heart." He'd laugh and say, "That's because you never let me get angry, Mom." His father passed away when Daniel was 16. After that, it was just the two of us. We shared everything, our meals, our worries, even our silence. When he went to university, I worked extra hours just to send him a little money each month. He always said, "Mom, you don't have to." But I wanted to. That's what mothers do. We give, even when no one asks. The first time Daniel brought home his girlfriend, I remember the way my heart fluttered. Her name was Mia. She was beautiful, tall, graceful, with a smile that seemed to brighten the room. I remember thinking, she's the kind of woman who will keep my son happy. She talked fast, laughed easily, and called me Auntie Leela right away. That night, I cooked too much food. Stew, fish, vegetables, the kind of meal you make when you want to impress someone who might soon become family. Mia ate very little. She said she was watching her diet. I remember her polite smile when I offered her seconds. "It's delicious, Auntie," she said, "but I'm full already." I nodded, pretending not to feel that tiny sting, the kind that comes when love meets difference. They got married 2 years later. A small ceremony, nothing fancy. I cried when Daniel held Mia's hand and promised to protect her forever. When I moved in with them after my retirement, it wasn't supposed to be permanent. They had just bought a house, and Daniel asked me, "Mom, come stay with us for a while until you get settled. You'll like the neighborhood." Mia smiled and agreed, though I noticed how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. But I told myself not to imagine things. She was young, adjusting, maybe tired. So I packed my things, my few books, my sewing kit, some old photo frames, and moved into their guest room. At first, everything was fine. In the mornings, I'd wake up early, make breakfast, and quietly clean the kitchen before they came down. Daniel always thanked me. "Mom, you don't have to do all this," he'd say, hugging me before leaving for work. Mia would smile politely, scrolling on her phone as she sipped her smoothie. I'd watch her sometimes and think, how different her world is from mine. She worked from home, always on video calls, always looking so composed. I admired her, truly. She seemed so confident, so sure of herself. But slowly, little things began to change. It started with the dishes. She'd say, "Auntie, you don't need to do the dishes. Just leave them. I'll handle it." So I stopped. But when she came home and saw the sink full, she sighed and washed them herself. Then, the next morning, Daniel softly asked, "Mom, maybe you can help with the dishes sometimes? Mia gets tired after work." I nodded, of course, but I wondered, hadn't she told me not to touch them? These were small things. I brushed them aside. Then came the matter of groceries. Mia liked certain brands. She wanted almond milk, gluten-free bread, organic this and that. I'd tried to remember, but sometimes I'd forget. I'd buy what was cheaper or familiar. She never said anything directly, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. Once I overheard her say to Daniel, "Your mom's trying, but she's stuck in her old ways." It hurt, though I pretended not to hear. Months went by. The house began to feel less like a home and more like a space I borrowed. I kept to my room most of the time. I'd read, watch quiet TV shows, or knit. Sometimes I'd hear laughter from their room, shared jokes, soft whispers. I was happy for them, truly. But I also missed when Daniel used to talk to me for hours. Now our conversations were shortened. A "good morning" or "how are you, Mom?" before he rushed out. Mia was polite, but distant, like a host who wanted to be kind, but also wanted her guest to leave soon. Still, I told myself, she's young. She's building her own life. You must give her space. Then one afternoon, everything changed. It was a Sunday. The rain had just stopped, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. I was watering the small garden by the porch, the one I'd planted with marigolds and herbs. My neighbor's daughter came running up to me, holding her phone. "Grandma Leela," she said, her voice small and hesitant, "is this you?" I frowned, taking the phone gently. On the screen was a post, a public one. A photo of a messy kitchen counter, dishes unwashed, crumbs everywhere. And beneath it, a caption that said, "Some people move in saying they'll help, but all they do is sit around and make more work for you. Maybe age really does make you lazy." It was from Mia's account. At first, I thought maybe it wasn't about me. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But then I noticed the mug in the photo, my favorite one with a small chip on the rim, the one Daniel had painted for me in 5th grade. I stood there for a long time, my hand trembling around the phone. The rain started again, light and cold. I could feel each drop on my skin, but I didn't move. When I went back inside, I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once placed food for the two of them. The house was quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just smiled, the kind of small, tired smile that comes when you realize your place in someone's story has changed. Later that evening, Daniel came home. He looked at me and hesitated, as if he already knew. "Mom," he said softly, "Mia didn't mean—" I raised my hand gently. "It's all right," I said. "I know she's young. She didn't mean harm." But inside, something in me cracked, quietly, like thin glass under pressure. That night, I couldn't sleep. I looked at the family photo on my bedside table, the one taken on their wedding day. We were all smiling. I wondered if that smile of hers had been as polite then as it felt now. That was the day I realized love doesn't always vanish in storms. Sometimes it just grows quieter, waiting for a chance to speak again. The morning after that post, the house felt different. Not louder, not colder, just heavier. Like something invisible had filled the air, pressing against the walls, against my chest. When I came down for breakfast, Mia was already there. Her hair was neatly tied, her phone beside her cup. She looked up for a moment, then smiled, Too quickly, too politely. "Morning, Auntie." "Good morning," I answered, my voice calm. Daniel sat between us, glancing from one to the other, like someone watching a storm cloud forming. I poured my tea slowly, the sound of it breaking the silence. No one mentioned the post, but we all knew. The day moved quietly. I folded laundry, watered the plants, swept the porch, the same way I always did. But each task felt heavier now, as if I had to prove something with every motion of my hand. When I finished sweeping, I sat by the window and stared out at the garden. The marigolds were blooming, bright and unapologetic. It was strange how flowers could bloom even when hearts did not. That afternoon, I heard Mia on the phone. Her voice was cheerful, but the words were sharp. She said, "No, she's still here. I know Daniel feels bad for her, but she doesn't do much. She just sits around." I froze. The broom slipped from my hands, falling softly to the floor. She continued, "It's hard, you know, having someone always in your space. She means well, but it's like having a guest who never leaves." There was laughter on the other end of the call. A friend, probably. Then Mia's voice softened. "I just wish I don't know, find something else to do. Maybe go stay with relatives or join a club or something." Her tone wasn't angry. It was casual, almost tired. And somehow that hurt even more. That night, I sat on my bed and thought about the years I'd spent working. 35 years in the library. I used to guide children through books, teach them patience, kindness, curiosity. Now, I was being spoken of as if I were an old burden someone didn't know how to put down. I looked around the small room, my few books, my folded clothes, my memories stacked neatly on shelves. It didn't feel like home anymore. But I didn't want to leave in anger. That's not how I wanted Daniel to remember me. A few days later, I decided to bake something. Daniel loved my banana bread since he was a boy. I thought maybe, just maybe, it could bring some warmth back into the house. I bought fresh bananas, flour, and sugar. The familiar rhythm of mixing and measuring comforted me. When the bread was baking, the smell filled the house, sweet and warm. For a moment, it felt like old times again. But then, Mia came into the kitchen, wrinkling her nose slightly. "Oh, Auntie, you baked?" "Yes," I said, smiling softly. "Banana bread. Daniel loves it." She hesitated, then said, "That's nice, but I actually just cleaned the kitchen. I was hoping to keep it tidy today. It's hard to maintain when it's used all the time." Her words weren't cruel. They were quiet, polite, but they cut deep. I looked at the bread cooling on the counter and whispered, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mess up anything." Mia smiled, but it was the kind of smile people use when they want to end a conversation. "It's fine. I'll just wipe everything down again later." And she walked away. The smell of banana bread suddenly felt too sweet, too heavy. That evening, Daniel came home. He saw the bread and smiled. "You made this, Mom? Wow, it's been years." He took a bite and closed his eyes, like he was tasting a memory. "It's perfect," he said. Mia looked up from her phone. "It's good," she added quickly, but her tone was flat. I smiled, pretending everything was fine, but inside, I knew things were changing. Slowly, painfully. Over the next few weeks, I began to notice small changes in Daniel too. He was more careful with his words, more watchful.
Sometimes he'd sigh before speaking to me, as if already expecting tension. One evening, as we washed dishes together, he said quietly, "Mom, I think Mia feels uncomfortable sometimes. Maybe you can give her more space during the day." I looked at him, my son, the same boy who once held my hand crossing the street. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye. "I see," I said softly. "I'll stay in my room more then." He nodded, relieved. "Thanks, Mom. It's just, balance." Balance. Such a small word for such a big emptiness. So I kept my promise. I stayed in my room most of the time. I'd read, write in my old notebook, or look through photo albums. Sometimes I'd hear them laughing downstairs. Mia's voice bright and alive, Daniel's laughter softer but happy. I was glad he was happy. That was always my prayer, for him to find someone who would love him. But some nights, when the laughter faded and the house fell quiet, I'd whisper to myself, "You did your job, Lila. You raised him. Now let him go." Still, letting go isn't as simple as it sounds, especially when your heart still remembers the sound of your child calling, "Mom, look what I drew." One afternoon, I got a message on my phone. It was from one of my old colleagues, Mrs. Patel. She wrote, "Lila, are you all right? I saw something online that seemed about you." My heart sank. I opened my social media app, the one I rarely used. There it was. Another post. A short video this time. Mia talking to the camera, smiling faintly. Living with older relatives can be challenging, especially when they don't realize how much work they create for you. I know they mean well, but sometimes love also means setting boundaries. The video wasn't directly about me, but the comments made it clear. "You're so patient. I could never let my MIL live with me." Boundaries are so important, especially with lazy older folks. That word again, lazy. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Was I really lazy? Was I really a burden? I thought about the years I'd spent working double shifts, caring for Daniel, cleaning, cooking, saving. But I didn't defend myself. I didn't comment. I simply closed the app and set the phone down. Because sometimes silence is not weakness, it's survival. That evening, Daniel came home early. He looked uneasy. "Mia told me you saw the video," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Mom, she didn't mean to hurt you. She's just overwhelmed. She feels like her privacy is gone." I nodded. "I understand. Maybe," he continued, "you could think about getting your own place again, somewhere nearby. I'll help, of course. We can visit every week." I smiled gently. There it was, the beginning of goodbye. "Of course," I said softly. "That sounds good, Daniel." He looked relieved, though his eyes were sad. And in that moment, I realized he was torn between love for his mother and loyalty to his wife, and I couldn't make him choose. That night, I packed slowly. Not everything, just the essentials. A few clothes, my books, the framed photo of Daniel as a boy, and my old kettle. As I folded my shawl, I whispered, "Maybe this is what peace looks like. Quiet endings." The next morning, I told them over breakfast. "I found a small place near the park," I said gently. "I'll move in next week." Mia froze for a second, then smiled a little too brightly. "That's wonderful, Auntie. You'll have your own space." Daniel looked down at his plate. "Are you sure, Mom? You don't have to rush." I smiled. "I'm sure." Inside, my heart felt heavy, but I also felt a strange calm, like a long storm finally beginning to fade. A few days later, as I was packing the last of my boxes, Mia came to my door. She looked hesitant, holding a small envelope. "Auntie, I wanted to give you something." I turned to her, surprised. She handed me the envelope. Inside was a small gift card and a note that read, "Thank you for everything. I know things weren't easy. I hope you find happiness in your new home." I looked at her, this young woman who had hurt me without meaning to, who had spoken about me to the world as if I were a burden. And yet in that moment, I saw something else too, fear. She wasn't cruel, she was just scared of losing control, of being misunderstood, of living with someone she didn't fully know how to love. I smiled and said, "Thank you, Mia. I wish you both happiness too." She nodded, her eyes softening just a little. And for the first time, I felt no anger, only sadness, quiet and deep. That night, I sat in the empty guest room. The boxes were stacked by the door, the walls were bare. I could hear Daniel and Mia talking softly in their room. Then, silence. I closed my eyes and whispered a small prayer for peace, for understanding, for forgiveness. Because life is too short to carry bitterness. And though the world might see me as lazy, I knew the truth. My heart had worked hard its whole life. It had loved, endured, and learned when to let go.
That was how the distance grew between us, not in a single fight, but through quiet moments of misunderstanding, unspoken hurt, and love that didn't know how to fit anymore. The morning I moved out, the sky was gray. Not stormy, just tired looking. It matched how I felt. Daniel helped me carry the boxes to the car. He tried to smile, but his eyes couldn't hide the guilt sitting behind them. "Mom, I'll visit this weekend," he said. I nodded. "Of course, don't worry about me." Mia stood by the doorway, her arms crossed gently. She looked unsure whether to wave or just step back. When I walked past her, I smiled and said, "Take care of him, Mia. He's a good man." She smiled faintly. "I will, Auntie." It was such a small exchange, polite, careful, and final. Then Daniel started the car. As we drove away, I looked back at the house one last time. The curtains swayed in the breeze, and for a brief moment, I saw my reflection in the window, a small figure fading from someone else's home. My new apartment was simple. One bedroom, one kitchen, and a small balcony overlooking the park. It wasn't big, but it was quiet. When Daniel left after helping me unpack, I sat by the window and listened to the faint laughter of children playing in the park below. The silence inside was heavy, but it wasn't cruel. It was mine. I spent the next few days arranging my things slowly. I placed my photo frames on the shelf, Daniel at 5 years old, Daniel graduating, Daniel on his wedding day. Each photo felt like a chapter I had lived through with all my heart. But now, those moments were finished. I was in a new chapter, one that began with emptiness. The days passed quietly. I began to find comfort in small routines again, morning tea, walks in the park, phone calls with old friends. But sometimes, when the sun went down, I'd find myself scrolling through my phone, looking at Daniel's profile. He posted pictures of dinners with Mia, outings with friends. He looked happy. And even though part of me ached, I also felt relief. Because that's all I ever wanted.
for him to be happy. Still, one thought haunted me. Was I really the burden they said I was? One afternoon, about 2 weeks after I moved out, I received a message on my phone. It was from Mia. At first, my heart jumped. Then I hesitated, unsure whether to open it. Finally, I did. Auntie, I hope you're settling in well. I wanted to say sorry if I ever made you feel unwelcome. It wasn't my intention. I've been thinking about how things turned out, and I realize I didn't always handle it right. I read the message twice. The words were simple, but they carried something real, a softness I hadn't heard from her before. I typed slowly, "Thank you, Mia. I'm all right. We all make mistakes. I hope you're both well." She replied, "We are. Daniel misses you. We both do, actually." I stared at that last line for a long moment. Then I smiled. A quiet, tired smile, but this time it didn't hurt as much. Maybe she meant it. Maybe life was teaching her what I had learned long ago, that kindness costs nothing, but its absence leaves deep scars. A few days later, Daniel came to visit. He brought groceries and my favorite tea. "Mom," he said, looking around my small apartment, "this place suits you. It's peaceful." I nodded. Yes, peaceful is good. He sat down, fidgeting with his hands. "Daniel told Mia she messaged you. I'm glad. She's been thinking a lot. I think she feels guilty." I looked at him gently. "She's young, Daniel. We all hurt people without meaning to, especially when we're trying to find our place."
He sighed. "I should have done better too." I reached over and placed my hand on his. "You did what you thought was right. You chose love. I raised you to choose love, didn't I?" He smiled, tears forming in his eyes. "You did." That night, after he left, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights. The wind was cool, brushing against my cheeks like an old friend. I thought about forgiveness, how quiet it is, how it doesn't demand attention. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about choosing peace over pride. And I realized I had forgiven Mia long before her apology. Not because she asked for it, but because I needed to set myself free. But life has its own way of testing peace. About a month later, I received a call from Daniel late at night. His voice trembled. "Mom," he said, "Mia's in the hospital." My heart stopped. What happened? "She fainted this evening. They said it's exhaustion. She's been working too hard, barely eating." "I'll come," I said immediately. He hesitated. "You don't have to." "I'm coming, Daniel." The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. When I walked into the room, Mia was lying on the bed, pale and fragile, her hair messy, her eyes closed. Daniel sat beside her, holding her hand. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. "Mom," he whispered. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Go get some rest. I'll stay with her for a while." He hesitated, then nodded, exhausted. When he left, I sat quietly beside Mia. The steady beep of the monitor filled the silence. I looked at her, this young woman who once saw me as a burden, who had hurt me without knowing how deeply. Now she looked small, lost, and human. I reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You're still learning," I whispered. "We all are." After a while, her eyes opened slowly. She blinked, confused, then saw me. "Auntie." Her voice was soft, weak. "Shh," I said gently. "Don't talk, just rest." Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't think you'd come. Of course I came, I whispered. Your family. She looked at me for a long moment, guilt, confusion, and something like relief crossing her face. Then she began to cry. I'm sorry, she said between sobs, for everything. I was so selfish. I didn't understand. I wanted to do things my way. I thought I had to prove myself. But I hurt you. I reached for her hand. It was cold, trembling. I said, You're young, I said softly. You thought love meant control. But love, it's softer than that. It's patience. It's giving space, not taking it. She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. I didn't know how to live with another woman in the house. I thought you were judging me. I smiled faintly. No, dear. I was just watching you find your rhythm. I knew you'd figure it out. She squeezed my hand, her voice barely a whisper. Can you forgive me? I looked at her. Not as my daughter-in-law, not as the woman who had called me lazy online, but as someone's frightened daughter, trying her best to grow. I already did, I said. And for the first time, she smiled through her tears. A real smile. Not polite, not distant. Just real. When Daniel came back, he saw us holding hands. He froze for a moment, then whispered, You two are talking? I nodded. We're healing. He looked at Mia, then at me, and tears filled his eyes. Thank you, he said quietly. Both of you. We sat there in silence for a long time. The three of us, bound by blood and mistakes and the fragile threads of forgiveness. After a few days, Mia was discharged. I cooked for them at their house while she recovered, simple soups and rice, like old times. This time, she didn't protest. She watched me cook, asking questions, laughing softly. Once she said, You make it look so easy. I smiled. Years of practice and a lot of love. She paused. I want to learn from you. Not just cooking, how you stay calm, even when things hurt. I looked at her gently. Pain teaches us patience, and patience teaches us peace. She nodded as if memorizing those words. A week later, when I was about to leave for home, Mia hugged me, really hugged me, for the first time. She whispered, Thank you for not giving up on me. I held her close and said, Family is not about never hurting each other. It's about staying when it matters. That night, back in my apartment, I sat by the window again. The same park below, the same children's laughter echoing faintly in the distance. But this time I felt light, like something had been lifted from my heart. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it softens the memory. And it was true. The pain didn't vanish, but it no longer owned me. That was the moment everything changed. Not through anger or confrontation, but through compassion, through showing up when no one expected me to. Sometimes the turning point in life isn't loud. It's a quiet hospital room, a hand held in forgiveness, a tear shared in silence. When I woke up the next morning, the sunlight fell across my bed like a blessing. The world outside was calm again. Children laughing in the park, someone watering plants on their balcony, a dog barking softly somewhere far away. It was strange, but everything seemed lighter, not because life had changed overnight, but because I had. The heaviness I'd carried for months, the quiet shame, the hurt, the loneliness, had loosened its grip. Forgiveness does that. It unties invisible knots, one thread at a time. The days that followed were peaceful. Mia and Daniel visited often. Sometimes they brought food, sometimes they came empty-handed, just wanting to sit and talk. The first time Mia and Daniel visited after Mia's recovery, I noticed how she looked at me differently. There was no more careful distance in her eyes, only softness, gratitude. She helped me water the plants on the balcony. "You've got a magic touch," she said, smiling as she touched a marigold. "Everything you plant seems to bloom." I laughed quietly. "It's not magic, dear. It's patience. Plants don't rush. They grow when the time is right." She looked at me, thoughtful, and said, "I think that's what I'm learning. Patience." I nodded. It's a good teacher. One Sunday, Daniel brought over an old photo album from their house. "Mom, I found this in a box." He placed it on the table. The leather cover was worn, the corners frayed. I opened it slowly. Inside were pictures of Daniel as a boy, his first day at school, his messy birthday cakes, his teenage smile. Mia leaned over my shoulder, looking at the photos. "You two have been through so much," she said softly. I smiled. "We have. But every story has quiet chapters too, the ones no one else sees." She looked at Daniel and whispered, "You're lucky to have her." He nodded, his eyes shining. "I know." For the first time in a long time, I saw the same closeness between us that used to fill our home years ago. Not the same shape, but the same warmth, grown, changed, and gentle. Over the following weeks, Mia began to call me more often, not out of duty, but genuinely. Sometimes she'd ask for recipes, sometimes just to talk. Once she called and said, "Auntie, I made your lentil soup. Daniel said it tasted exactly like yours." I laughed. "That means it was full of love then." Another time she said, "Can you tell me how to handle a bad day? I get overwhelmed so easily." I told her, "When the day feels heavy, stop and breathe. Ask yourself what truly matters at this moment. Most of the time, it's less than we think." She was quiet for a while, then said softly, "You're right. I wish I had your calm." I smiled. It took me 63 years to earn it. Slowly, a new rhythm formed between us, not one of roles, but of understanding. Mia began to share things with me. She told me about her work stress, about the pressure to appear perfect online, about the fear of failing as a wife. Her honesty surprised me. She said, "When people liked my posts, it made me feel seen, but I didn't realize I was hurting people I actually loved." I placed my hand on hers. We all crave to be seen, but the people who truly see us, they don't need posts. They sit with us in silence. Her eyes filled with tears. I wish I'd known that earlier. I squeezed her hand gently. Now you do. A few weeks later, Mia invited me to their house for dinner. Her invitation was simple, no formality, just warmth. "Please come, Auntie," she said. "I'm cooking tonight. No takeout, I promise." I smiled. "All right, I'll come." When I arrived, the house looked the same, but it felt different. There was no tension in the air, no invisible line between us. The table was set for 3. Mia served her homemade vegetable stew, and to my surprise, it was delicious. Daniel grinned. She practiced for days. Mia laughed shyly. I wanted to get it right. We ate slowly, talking and laughing. At one point, Mia looked at me and said, "I used to think peace meant silence, but I've learned it means comfort, being able to speak and still feel safe." I nodded. "Yes, dear. Silence hides pain. Comfort heals it." After dinner, Mia brought out a small box. Inside was a framed photo, the 3 of us sitting together, smiling. She said, "I had this printed. I wanted us to start a new album, new memories." I looked at the photo, at my son's kind face, at Mia's hopeful smile,
at my own quiet eyes, and I felt something shift inside me. A chapter had closed, but a new one had begun, one built not on guilt or obligation, but on forgiveness and choice. That night, when I returned home, I placed the photo on my table beside my old one, Daniel as a little boy, and now Daniel as a grown man with his wife. The two frames stood side by side, years apart, but joined by love. I whispered softly, "You did well, Leela. You didn't lose a son, you helped build a family." The weeks turned into months. Life became simple again, but this time it was full of quiet gratitude. Sometimes I'd meet Mia for tea in the park. She'd tell me about her new projects, her dreams, her small triumphs. I'd listen, smiling, as if I were watching a flower bloom. She said once, "I used to think you were judging me, but now I realize you were just watching, like a gardener, waiting for the plant to grow." I laughed softly. Exactly. A gardener doesn't pull on the leaves to make them taller. She just waters them and waits.
Daniel often joined us on weekends. He'd bring his camera and take photos of us feeding the birds. Once, he showed me a picture he'd taken of me smiling at Mia. "Look at you two," he said proudly. "You look like best friends." Mia giggled. "We're getting there." And truly, we were. Not because everything was perfect, but because we had learned to understand each other's silences. One afternoon, Mia came over alone. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. I smiled gently. "Go on." She hesitated, then blurted out, "I'm pregnant." For a moment, my breath caught. Then joy rushed through me like sunlight after a storm. "Oh, my dear," I said, tears in my eyes. "That's wonderful news." She began to cry softly. "I was scared to tell you. I didn't know how you'd feel." I took her hands in mine. "I feel blessed, truly blessed." She smiled through her tears. "I want you to be part of this. I want our child to know you." Those words broke something inside me, the last pieces of old pain that had stayed quiet in my heart. I hugged her tightly, and for the first time, it felt like family again, whole, unbroken, real. Over the next months, I visited often, helping with small things, cooking, preparing the nursery, teaching Mia how to rest. One afternoon, while folding tiny clothes together, she looked at me and said, "You know, Auntie, sometimes I still think about that post I made. It haunts me." I shook my head gently. "Let it go, child. You've already learned what it had to teach you." She sighed. "I guess it taught me that words live longer than we think." I nodded. "Yes, but kindness lives longer too. Keep planting that instead." She smiled and said, "I will." When the baby finally arrived, a little girl with bright, curious eyes, they named her Leah. "After you," Daniel said softly at the hospital. I couldn't speak for a moment. I just held that tiny bundle close, feeling her heartbeat against mine. Mia whispered, "You're the calmest person I know. We want her to grow up like you, gentle, patient, kind." I smiled through tears. "Then she'll make the world softer, one heart at a time." From then on, my days were full again, not with chores or expectations, but with laughter, baby giggles, and second chances. Sometimes, as I rocked Leah to sleep, I'd hum an old lullaby I used to sing for Daniel. Mia would stand at the door, smiling quietly, watching us. And in those moments, I'd think, this is how love heals. Not all at once, but slowly, tenderly, like sunlight creeping through curtains after a long night. Forgiveness turned enemies into family, silence into laughter, and pain into wisdom. And all it took was patience.
the kind that waits for hearts to grow, just like flowers after rain. It's been 3 years since that storm. 3 years since I packed my boxes and left the house that was once my son's. 3 years since the word lazy burned on a screen and taught me what patience really means. Now I sit by the same balcony where I used to drink tea alone. But I'm not lonely anymore. My hands hold a small blanket, half finished for Leah's birthday, and my heart feels light, like a window finally opened after rain. Leah is 2 now, curious, wild, and full of laughter. She calls me Nana Leela. Every time she says it, something inside me heals a little more. Sometimes she toddles to my balcony, chasing bubbles Daniel blows from the kitchen. Mia follows with her phone in one hand and a towel in the other, trying to keep up. Their laughter fills the air, and I think, this is what peace sounds like. Life has slowed down in the sweetest way. I still wake early, still make my tea the same way, 1 spoon of leaves, a touch of honey. But now I drink it while listening to messages from Mia. She sends me little videos, Leah helping her mix cake batter, Leah dancing to nursery songs, Leah holding a tiny watering can saying, "Like Nana." Every message feels like a small apology turned into love. Not the kind spoken in words, but the kind lived quietly day after day. One afternoon, Mia came over without warning. She looked tired, hair loose, dark circles under her eyes. She sat on my couch and sighed. "Auntie," she said, "sometimes I don't know if I'm doing this right. Motherhood, work, marriage, it all feels like too much." I smiled and poured her tea. "No one ever does it right, dear. We just do our best. The rest works itself out." She leaned her head on my shoulder like a daughter. I wish I'd understood that earlier. I stroked her hair gently. "You were too busy learning how to be strong. Now you're learning how to be soft." Later, when she left, I sat quietly and thought about how far we'd come, from polite smiles and misunderstandings to shared tears and tea. Forgiveness had turned distance into closeness. It hadn't erased the past, but it had rewritten what the past meant. That, I think, is what healing truly is. A few months later, Daniel surprised me with a new phone. "Mom," he said, grinning, "you need to keep up with technology." I laughed. "Oh, I barely keep up with the kettle." He set it up for me, showing me how to use the camera. He said, "Post something. Mia and I want to see your pictures too." So I did. My first post was a picture of Leah's hand in mine. The caption said, "Hands that once let go can still hold again." Mia commented with 3 hearts. Daniel wrote, "Love you, Mom." And for the first time, the same platform that once broke my heart made it whole again. Time moves differently when peace returns. Days don't rush. They flow like quiet water. I've started teaching again. Not in a library, but in a small community group where older folks read stories to children. When I tell them tales, I see the little faces light up, the way Daniel's once did. Sometimes I slip in my own story, a simple version, about a woman who learned that kindness is stronger than pride. The children always listen closely, and one will ask, "Did she live happily ever after?" And I smile and say, "She learned to be happy. That's even better." One evening as I was tidying up, Mia called, "Can we come over for dinner?" I said, "Of course, I'll make stew." When they arrived, Leah ran to me with something in her hands, a small card covered in colorful scribbles. I asked, "What's this?"
"It's you, Nana," she said proudly. "You're smiling." I looked at the messy drawing, a round face with big eyes and a wide smile, and I thought, she sees me as happy. That's all I ever wanted. Mia hugged me then. "She talks about you every day," she said. "You're her safe place." Those words wrapped around me like a warm shawl. After dinner, when Daniel and Mia were washing dishes, Leah climbed into my lap. "Nana," she whispered, "why are you always calm?" I laughed softly. "Because the world gets noisy, my dear, and someone has to stay quiet enough to listen." She nodded seriously, as if understanding more than her age allowed. Then she rested her head against my chest and fell asleep. In that moment, I realized my life had come full circle, from rocking Daniel as a baby to rocking his child. The cycle of love had continued, carrying both the pain and the peace forward. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I still think of that old post, not with anger anymore, but with gratitude. If it hadn't happened, maybe none of us would have learned what we did. Pain, I've discovered, is a teacher in disguise. It shows us where our hearts are still closed and asks us to open them wider. Mia's mistake became our lesson. My silence became our bridge, and Daniel's love held the pieces together until they made sense again. A few weeks ago, Mia started a new blog, not about frustration, but about family. She wrote an entry called "The Strongest Woman I Know." She sent me the link before posting. In it, she wrote, "She never shouted. She never fought back. She just kept loving, even when I made it hard. I called her lazy once, but now I know she was just tired from a lifetime of giving. If I can be half as patient as she is, I'll have done well." When I finished reading, tears filled my eyes, not of sadness, but of peace, the kind that comes when time finally closes an old wound with grace. I didn't comment publicly. I simply sent her a message. "You've grown beautifully, dear. I'm proud of you." She replied, "Because you never stopped believing I could." Now, in the quiet evenings, I sometimes sit with my notebook again. The pages are filled with thoughts, small lessons I've gathered over the years. Maybe one day Leah will read them. I write things like, "Love doesn't need to be loud to be strong. Forgive faster than you're ready to. Home is not a place, it's the people who wait for you." Simple truths written in simple words. Because that's what life has turned out to be, simple and precious. Last week, Daniel and Mia took me to the park for a picnic, the same park I can see from my balcony. The weather was soft and golden, and Leah ran in circles chasing butterflies. At one point, Mia sat beside me and said, "Do you ever wish things had been different?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "If they had been easy, we wouldn't have grown." She smiled quietly. "You always find the lesson." I chuckled. That's what old age is for, collecting lessons and giving them away like candies. She laughed, and I joined her. The sound of our laughter mixed with Leah's giggles and the rustle of trees. It felt like music. When the sun began to set, I packed up the picnic blanket and looked at my family. My son, my daughter-in-law, my granddaughter. 3 hearts tied to mine by time and forgiveness. For a moment, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to life itself. Later that night, I sat by my window again, as I always do. The city lights twinkled below like 1,000 tiny hopes. I thought about the years behind me, the laughter, the mistakes, the silent meals, the slow healing, and I realized something simple. Peace doesn't arrive all at once.
It slips in quietly after you've cried enough, forgiven enough, and learned enough to make room for it. If anyone were to ask me what I've learned from all this, I would say, don't be afraid of being misunderstood. Be afraid of letting bitterness stay too long. People may hurt you out of fear or pride, but if you keep your heart gentle, love will find its way back, because it always does. When my daughter-in-law called me lazy online, I smiled instead of crying. I didn't know it then, but that smile was the beginning of our healing. Sometimes the hardest moments plant the kindest seeds, and years later, when they finally bloom, you realize they were never meant to destroy you, only to teach you how deep love can grow. So, if anyone ever hurts you with their words, remember this: you don't have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes all you have to do is wait, water the ground with patience, and let time show what true strength looks like. And that, dear listener, is the story of how forgiveness turned strangers back into family. How a word meant to wound became the start of something beautiful. And how love, when quiet, can still speak louder than anything else. Good night. Be gentle with others and with yourself.